Fellow Sadzaitas, it's been a while since I gave you guys a detailed update on current affairs. I apologize for missing in action. But what a week it's been. I don't even know where to begin. But one thing is very clear. The situation in our beloved country has now reached another level with the escalation of the Zanu PF factional fights. On one day, you have Opamchinguri revealing that the provincial disciplinary committees are abusing their powers to settle personal scores. On another day, you have Mutsvangwa confirming that ED and Chiwenga have a beef. And then he calls Chiwenga an illiterate dandayat. What? What? Zumano seka zake. And then you have Blessed Geza resurfacing from an unspecified location. This time around, he shows up in military gear with the Zimbabwean flag upside down, boldly declaring that President Mnangagwa knows exactly where he is, but he just doesn't have the guts to approach him. He even calls the president a coward. Now this has left many Zimbabweans saying, Gezane mabozo bose snuka. Hanzi, pama toilets ese Zimbabwe paya panenge pakanyorwa kuti varume. Hanzi, panofanwa kunyorwa kuti Geza. Now some are saying, pakuzofeka camouflage manji, ndo panyatsa kuita chi-attaki ma-Japanese. Ifaya mashotsi kuna manize. Iwe mutamba ita ize. Hatisi kutamba usatimise. 31 machi topinda mu street. It's the return of Comrade Bombshell amid the political kung fu and factional taekwondo in Zanu PF as the cracks in the presidium widen. Tectonic plates are shifting. Zanu PF is quaking. Our liberators are turning against each other. On one side, there is the Mnangagwa faction. Some are jokingly calling it Orchestra Zvigananda or simply Zvigananda Express. Then of course, there is the Chiwenga faction, which is heavily supported by a militant faction of the war vets. Keep in mind that the war veterans have three factions. There is the Geza faction, loyal to Chiwenga. Then there is the Sifas Ngue faction, loyal to Mnangagwa. And lastly, the Ethan Matibela faction, which though is not brazenly pro-Chiwenga, it is unmistakably anti-Mnangagwa. Speaking of which, Ethan Matibela recently had his press conference disrupted by the regime. Guess what happened? So what happened is, the regime sent Zigure to disrupt Ethan Matibela's press conference, after which the CIO then instructed the Department of Immigration to ensure that Ethan Matibela does not leave the country. So he is effectively a wanted man, though of course they don't want him. Pun intended. And then there is Christopher Manize Mutsvangwa, the self-professed sole liberator of Zimbabwe. The John Rambo of the liberation struggle, a man who sees himself as the future president of Zimbabwe, which of course doesn't make sense given his public support for the 2030 madness. So the question is, if ED remains in office beyond 2028, ko president wacho uchawana seiko na Mr. Manize, self-appointed head boy wema war vets. Iwo head boy wenyu uyu Mr. Manize. Zvechi head boy pa holiday generally vanombozvida eresi. Regera yako mana. Munoremara makura. Inga wango wachembera zvakanaka wanai Manize. Iwe ita easy usaprove kuti uri du. Tafi. Kwa kuita safety. Focus man, focus. So guys, it's now very clear to everyone that all is not well in Zanu PF. They can't hide it anymore. Because hiding it would be equivalent to trying to hide a pregnancy in 8 months. Kufeka bomba jacket ne hovoros, uchida kuti vanhu vasaone kuti une numbu. Everyone can tell that Zanu PF is pregnant. In fact, it's not just a pregnant, it's heavily pregnant. A pregnant of division. Chatingatovhunza ndechekuti, who is the father? Is it Chiwenga? Is it Mnangagwa? Or is it Christopher Manize Mutsvangwa? Well, fellow Sazaitas, slay queens and bingers, socialites, papalites, pasnamalites, parkujgarais, nevasnamarites. Welcome to the special report. Now, it is very important for us to understand how complicated the Zanu PF crisis is. It's not as simple as some people make it seem. Understand that there are various players involved, various factors to consider, and multiple permutations. It's not as simple as some people would have you believe. That's why you see that all the people who have been making predictions and giving dates, none of their predictions have come to pass. The truth of the matter is that no one really knows in detail exactly how this thing is going to play out. Even the players themselves are second-guessing each other, not knowing what move the other faction will make. It is also still possible, though highly unlikely, for the Zanu PF factions to resolve their differences. It's also possible for these factions to deliberately create confusion and leave you running with an artificial reality. Keep that in mind. The current situation in Zanu PF is very complex. That's why I laugh when I see people on social media saying that ED is finished. I've seen reports of people saying that his family has run away to Dubai and here the military is now officially taken over. ED is now just a placeholder and even his speeches are now being written for him by the military. Guys, you must understand the complexity and volatility of the current situation. You see, the legendary Chinese military general Sun Tzu once said that if you want to confuse your enemy, you must confuse your allies first. What that simply means is that for you to effectively mislead an opponent, you must first ensure that your own team is uncertain about your true intentions, making it hard for your own team to understand you. When you do that, you make it even more harder for your opponents to predict or counter your actions. So the core principle is that if your allies are unsure of your plans, they are less likely to reveal your strategy to the enemy, and the enemy will be less likely to understand your real intentions. So, if your allies are not sure whether or not you want to create a family dynasty, they are less likely to reveal to the enemy how you intend to create that family dynasty. If you leave your own team confused about your true intentions, imagine how confused your opponents are going to be. So by intentionally creating confusion within your own ranks, you make it more difficult for the enemy to discern your true strategy or intentions. Moreover, Sun Tzu taught that an attack on the enemy should only begin when the enemy has no opportunity to either defend or counterattack. Doesn't this remind you of a reptile called the crocodile? What are the attributes of a crocodile? Well, it's very patient. It will wait for the right time to strike. Crocodiles are ambush predators, hiding and waiting under the cover of water and then striking quickly at unsuspecting prey. The prey won't have any time to prey because the crocodile attacks when you least expect it, when you are comfortable, when you are absent-minded, making it difficult for you to either defend yourself or counterattack. Those are the attributes ED has been credited with over the years, which is why they call him Garwe, the crocodile. So don't you for a second underestimate him. Nor sir, nor ma'am. But I find that those who say that the military is now taken over assume that the whole military is anti-Mnangagwa and anti-2030. Now that is a very dangerous assumption to make. It is very clear to me that Blessed Geza has the backing of elements in the military, otherwise he wouldn't be doing what he is doing. At least not in the manner and fashion with which he is doing it. But don't you for a second assume that the whole security sector wants ED gone. That's a dangerous assumption. Even during the 2017 coup, the whole security sector was not in agreement regarding forcing Mugabe to step down. The police and the CIO were pro-Mugabe, which explains why the police had to be neutralized by the army and why Chihuri had to flee Zimbabwe after ED had taken over. So don't you for a second assume that everyone in Jok is anti-Mnangagwa. That's what makes this whole thing volatile, complex and dangerous, because you don't want factions in the army, in the military, in the security sector. You don't want factions there. Military factions are a recipe for a civil war. Understand the volatility and complexity of this conflict. It's deadly for both factions. The Mnangagwa faction faces the possibility of a military-assisted uprising, and on the other hand, members of the Chiwenga faction could face a treason if their plan doesn't work out. It's a lose-lose situation. Both camps must play their cards well, play their cards right, a failure of which disaster will strike. A touch is a move. You snooze, you lose. Whether gander or goose, be careful of what you choose. It's the genesis of coups. The Chiwenga faction finds itself in the exact situation military generals were days before the coup. You see, part of the reason why the military generals moved against Mugabe in 2017 was because treason was awaiting them. Zanu PF issued a statement after General Chiwenga's pre-coup presser in which it accused Chiwenga of having committed treason. Remember when Vice President ED was fired in 2017? General Chiwenga did a presser in which he blasted the Zanu PF leadership for firing members belonging to the Mnangagwa faction, after which Zanu PF played the treason card. At that moment, the die was cast. Literally. It was at this point that the generals realized that it was now do or die. And as Christopher Mutsvangwa revealed in his viral interview with Maynard Manyoa, the Ministry of Justice had already prepared dockets against the generals. And to quote Mutsvangwa's words, he said, it was now a question of survival. So they had to expedite a plan which had been in motion for years. A plan which initially was supposed to be a gradual democratic takeover of Zanu PF by ED, but was however resisted by a faction led by General Mujuru. This resistance by the Mujuru faction is what disabled Mnangagwa from becoming vice president in 2004. Remember that in 2004, Zanu PF needed to fill in the void created by the death of VP Simon Muzenda. So Mnangagwa, who was a Speaker of Parliament at the time, was poised to become the next Vice President with support from at least 6 out of 10 provinces. Keep in mind that at the time, Zanu PF Vice Presidents were not by appointment. They were elected. To this end, meetings were held at different locations by the Mnangagwa faction, culminating in the infamous Cholocho Declaration, which I talked about in one of my previous videos. Had the Cholocho Declaration succeeded, ED would have become vice president in 2004, making him one step closer to achieving his ultimate goal of becoming Zim 1. But it wasn't to be. His plan went down south. General Mujuru worked very hard to block the ascension of ED into the presidium, and Mujuru succeeded, culminating in his wife, Joyce, becoming Zimbabwe's first female vice president in 2004. This meant that General Mujuru became enemy number 1 to the Mnangagwa faction, and Joyce Mujuru became the face of the Mujuru faction, which was later named Gamatox. Sadly, General Mujuru died 6 years later in a mysterious fire that still beggars belief to this day. And as if the script was written by a Nollywood filmmaker, the wife of General Mujuru, Joyce, was fired from government and expelled from Zanu PF 3 years after the death of her husband. She was accused of trying to use juju to overthrow Mugabe. and so she was expelled from Zanu PF together with leading members of a Gamatox faction, a chief amongst them, Rugare Gumbo and Didmas Mutasa. Ironically, Gumbo and Mutasa said the exact same thing that Blessed Geza is saying today. Because when Gumbo and Mutasa got expelled, they maintained that they remained members of the real and true Zanu PF, calling the Mugabe-led Zanu PF a fake and corrupt. That is exactly what Geza said in his last address. He said he doesn't belong to the Zanu PF of Mnangagwa. In fact, in his actual words, he said, "You can't expel me from an organization that I don't belong to." So Geza is basically saying, I remain a Zanu PF member, just not Mnangagwa's Zanu PF. Now, Blessed Geza also said that Zanu PF is junior to Zipra and Zanla in that it is a product of Zipra and Zanla. Now, there are two issues I want to deal with here. Firstly, this is an admission that the gun leads the politics. But most importantly, I want to set the record straight for posterity. You see, it's not factual to say that Zipra and Zanla created Zanu PF, or that Zanu PF is a baby of Zipra and Zanla. Let's be very clear. We all know that Zipra and Zanla were military wings of ZAPU and ZANU. It's the politics that gave birth to the gun being Zipra and Zanla. You see, in Zimbabwe's first election in 1980, after ZAPU and ZANU had failed to unite, or rather I should say, after ZANU had refused to unite with ZAPU, ZANU participated in the 1980 elections as Zanu PF. Moreover, after the Unity Accord of 1987, which saw PF ZAPU and Zanu PF uniting to become one party, the name of the new unified party remained Zanu PF. So the name Zanu PF did not come in 1987, and also Zanu PF as an institution was not conceptualized in 1987. What actually happened in 1987, and this I must explain, is that ZAPU disbanded and joined an already existing institution called Zanu PF. The whole thing was then sold as a merger of two parties. ZAPU did this in the name of unity to stop the bloodshed. That's your Unity Accord right there in a nutshell. But I wish to reiterate, and this I must strongly emphasize, that the original party called ZANU became Zanu PF after the Lancaster House Agreement. Even ZAPU became a PF ZAPU after the Lancaster House Agreement when Mugabe and company refused to unite with ZAPU. Where does the PF come from? Well, I explained this in my Gukuraondi series. The PF obviously means a patriotic front. It was formed in the run-up to the Lancaster House Conference, where ZAPU and ZANU negotiated for independence under one political umbrella called the Patriotic Front, with the intention of participating in the 1980 elections as one party and with one leader. Domiso Dabengwa alleged that Josiah Tongogara was actually pushing for Joshua Nkomo to become president of the Unified Party, with Robert Mugabe as Secretary General. Tongogara was allegedly very vocal about it and pushed very strongly for it, but of course he faced a massive resistance from the political leadership of ZANU. Dabengwa added that this is the very reason why Tongogara was murdered. But whatever you think about Dabengwa's version of events, one thing is very clear. Zanu PF is not a creation of Zipra and Zanla. But anyway, my point was, Blessed Geza is adamant that he remains a member of the true Zanu PF and that no one can fire him from the true Zanu PF. Meaning to say, he has no intention to destroy what he calls the true Zanu PF. His vendetta is against Mnangagwa's Zanu PF. You take away Mnangagwa from the picture, Geza has no issues with Zanu PF. Now, this is very important, and let me explain why. You see, it confirms the point I have been making all along, that the idea of a transitional authority proposed by Geza will not work. The problem with the idea of a transitional authority is not the legal framework. as some have been saying. The problem is definitely not the law. You see, when the GNU between the two MDCs and Zanu PF was conceptualized, there was no law that supported such a thing. Our constitution at the time didn't have a council of ministers or the position of a prime minister. All executive power was vested in the office of the president. That's why they had to do a constitutional amendment to create the position of prime minister, a deputy prime minister, and all the other stuff necessary to legalize the global political agreement. So, the issue is definitely not the law. If they all agreed right now on the modalities of setting up a transitional authority, a parliament would easily make the necessary legislation to legalize that thing. Very easy. Again, the issue is not the law. The issue is in the politics. The issue is in the danger of what a transitional authority will do to Zanu PF. If they were proposing a government of national unity, then it would make sense. Not a transitional government. A transitional government leaves Zanu PF completely without power. A government of national unity, just like what happened from 2009 to 2013, leaves Zanu PF with considerable power. What is the goal for the proposed demonstrations? Well, Geza said that the reason for the planned demonstrations is to force ED and the current administration to step down, after which a transitional authority will be established to run Zimbabwe and implement far-reaching reforms that will create a conducive environment for the holding of free and fair elections at a future date. This is literally the recipe, the template for ending Zanu PF. I can assure you right now that no one in Zanu PF wants that. No one, including Geza himself. Remember, the only Zanu PF he hates is Mnangagwa's Zanu PF. He said he remains a member of the true Zanu PF, and not only that, he said Chiwenga is his leader. He also called him the leader of Zimbabwe. Now, it doesn't take a genius to see that Geza and his war vets have taken sides in this Zanu PF factional conflict. They openly support the Chiwenga faction. But people are rallying behind Geza because he is at the moment playing the role of the opposition. He is literally doing what many Zimbabweans have been calling for Chamisa to do for years, and that is radical politics. Direct confrontation with the regime. Geza is a beneficiary of the absence of a vibrant opposition in and outside parliament. He literally found a fertile ground for his message. As we speak, Blessed Geza is the official opposition in Zimbabwe. However, I must make this very clear that even though Geza is the de facto opposition, he is not opposing Zanu PF. This I must emphasize. Geza is not opposing Zanu PF. He is opposing Mnangagwa. He is not fighting Zanu PF. He is fighting Mnangagwa. Please, may this be understood by anyone who cares to listen. Zanu PF is not Mnangagwa and Mnangagwa is not Zanu PF. Saying Pasina Mnangagwa is not equivalent to saying Pasina Zanu PF. Wanting Mnangagwa gone is not equivalent to wanting Zanu PF gone. People in Zanu PF are not fighting to destroy Zanu PF. They are fighting to control it. They are not fighting to give up power. They are fighting to take power. And so, when you go to demonstrate, you must go with the full knowledge that Hamusikurisa Zanu, Murukurisa ED. You are not demonstrating against Zanu PF. You are demonstrating against ED. One hopes that leaders of the opposition also understand this. The Geza revolution is not an anti-Zanu PF thing. It's an anti-Mnangagwa thing. The question you should be asking yourself is, what will happen if Mnangagwa steps down? What sort of government will take over in the aftermath of an ED exit? And how will that government be different from the government that took over in the aftermath of the Mugabe exit? The other question you should ask yourself is, What are you as the citizen really tired of? Are you tired of Mnangagwa, or are you tired of Zanu PF? Or are you tired of both? And when we say change, what does that mean? A democratic change. If we remove Mnangagwa and put Chiwenga, is that change? When we removed Mugabe and replaced him with Mnangagwa, was that change? What about our opposition leaders who are always at each other's throats? Are they really agents of change, or they also need to be changed? The other question you should ask yourself is, on the day of the demonstration, what will you be demanding for? Where are those demands coming from? Are you as the citizen allowed to make your own demands, or you will just be told what to write on your placards and what to chant as you march and what to write in your petitions? All these questions should make you introspect and ponder on what you need to demand for. If at all, this is a people-driven process. But whatever happens, I'll be here to marinate you with all the details without fear or favor, because on this platform, we say it as it is. And as always, thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoy the content, please like and share.